First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public comments will be next, and we're getting the list. The list? Well, that's okay.
You're
So,
on the side.
no signups?
No, you'll be the only one.
Okay. Mr. Mosby, floor is yours.
Okay, Mr. Mosby, state your name and address
My
for the
name is
record.
John Mosby, 15 Addison Avenue, South Norwalk, Connecticut. I just got the budget tonight, and I understand it had been out. I did have a chance to look at a little brief of it. Just a couple of concerns that I have about the budget that I've seen in here where, and you know, my speak have been about bridge. I asked the board over and over again about when they make the grants in for the upgrading the school, that they always put in all the other schools, but bridge for some reason are still left out. And I wanna know why. Every other school, Merrimack, Roaden, and all these schools always get grants to upgrade their school. And this is the last school in the black community. And our kids up there at Bridge is put in like in a little hut. They won't build a cafeteria bigger, and that school is a beautiful, solid school. They won't even make the cafeteria big. They promised us that they're gonna keep Bridge open. They promised me at community college that all of them gonna do something to help Bridge. But for some reason or another, the community and everybody are left out, and someone have to take a stand. Mr. Mandela took a stand on what was right. It took him a long time, but he won. The Pope took a stand on how you treating the Pope. Everybody made with it. Someone in this country got to stand up for the poor people. And I want to know tonight, what are you all going to do about Bridge? They make it a bigger school. You got all, the 60-some kids, that school used to hold 250. We had trade schools to help our kids. They promised us all of these things. But for some reason or another, when it comes to Bridge, no one want to do nothing about Bridge. And I would like tonight for you to hold both to tell us what you're going to do with Bridge. Because that's a nice little school. Them kids need help. We're not making Bridge for the bright-eyed kid. You got the poor, the handicapped, the needy, need a play. And all this money coming in here in these grants, y'all ain't doing nothing. Y'all riding around these big Cadillacs and everything, living good. That's wrong. And it's time to call you on the carpet. And I'm going to stand up for what is right. And I want to know tonight, I want to see you hire some more black teachers here, some Hispanic teachers. I'm looking at the data now. It's bad with what's going on in the schools, and you all keep setting up here, ain't doing a fair thing but playing politics. And I'm going to stand up for it. And I'm going to tell you right now, if the Lord give me health and strength, if y'all don't straighten it out, we, myself and a few other people, we're going to have to bring a suit against you to make you correct these things because you are not doing right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. That is all that is signed up.
All right,
End of public comments.
thank you. All right, next we'll move on to superintendent's report.
It's a very brief report tonight, part because of the budget presentation that we're getting ready to do, but in the month, last month in December, we lost perhaps one of the greatest leaders in our history in the world, Nelson Mandela. We had organized to have some students here to be able to talk about some of the activities, but I did want to recognize that because it was very, very important, and I wanted to convey to the board that teachers at every level had incorporated age-appropriate lessons in their day. They took the time in our elementary schools, our middle schools, as well as in our high schools, to engage in many different discussions, they read books, they had Wolf Pit, downloaded articles, used their smart boards to have class discussions. At Cranberry, they used age-appropriate books that were read within each class. Tracy, these are just a few samples of some of the many, many schools, all of our schools actually, and some of the many activities that they had organized and run. And so I will take these details and put them in the board, in an email, and send them to the board for those of you who would like to get a sense of what we did during the month to recognize the passing of South Africa's Nelson Mandela. Finally, it's probably a little bit on the other side is, one of the issues that, given the weather over the last month, repeatedly comes up as something, is what's the process? What goes into making decisions about closing a school or early dismissal? And I wanted you to know as a board and the community to know that I actually take that decision very, very seriously. Obviously, there's nothing more important than the safety of our young people. So everything that we do, every bit of data and information that we look at is done on a very, very careful basis. Obviously, we have parents with many different situations. Many of our children may be from single-parent homes, parents who work, parents who don't work, lots of concerns, and it's unfortunately, it's the kind of decision that you make that somebody's gonna be upset. And that's just the nature of the way it unfolds. But I do feel it's important that we communicate and be as transparent as we can with our parents about what are the process steps that we use, what's the criteria that we look at, how do we make judgments about this data and then make the decisions that we make. And so Brenda Williams, our Director of Communications, and I are working on a piece we're almost finished to communicate and get it out to parents. Given that it's so early in the season, I just wanted our parents to understand what goes into this and the attention that we take and making our best effort to make decisions that are the right ones, that are timely, and I think equally as important, notifications of communication with parents. So we're going to be getting that out within the next week, and I just wanted to share that with you.
Not to totally put you on the spot here, but after the public comments, there was a question about what are we doing for Briggs? Can you give us a quick update on what we're doing for Briggs?
Sure. Briggs, as you know, has been the recipient of a major turnaround grant, approximately $626,000. There's another $124,000 that we allocated to our alliance funding. The majority of that money goes to a partner that was part of the proposal that was funded by the state called Our Piece of the Pie. They have a responsibility to be providing youth development services, services to support young people through addressing social emotional needs, to address internships, mentors, and so on. In addition, we received from the state a capital investment of over $300,000 for that particular school for technology. Over the last 6 months, with a new partner, we've been obviously going through some growing pains, making adjustments. In the last couple of weeks before the holiday, actually spent a good deal of time, both Mr. Dodona and I, meeting with Marie Allen, spending a good deal of time at the school, meeting with representatives from the state, meeting with representatives from OPP, Our Piece of the Pie, the partner. We actually have a major framework for which we're going to update and revise some of the steps. We're looking really closely at several areas. What we're doing in that school to improve instruction and make it as innovative and as creative as possible to meet the needs of our young people. We want to make sure that the OPP staff are working very closely with our psychologist, our social worker, our guidance counselor, and staff so that they are functioning as a team, supporting the needs of those young people. We have, as part of our plan, an area to zero in on parents and how we can engage parents and or guardians more meaningfully. Looking at opportunities for more flexible scheduling. We actually have a major plan that's actually going to be completed by the end of this month. And we will be I gave a preliminary report to the board before the holiday, and I promised the board that there'd be a more comprehensive report. We're looking at staffing, we are looking at the allocation, and perhaps even making budget adjustments in terms of staffing. And we're gonna be very, very explicit about the goals and what we hope to accomplish. So Briggs is going to be a successful place for the young people that we have there. We are not going to step back and let things unfold if we're not pleased with what we see. And it will have our attention and everything that we can put into supporting the young people at Briggs.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Mike?
So so we're spending almost $1 million then between, these grants, between what we're getting from the operating grant as well as the capital grant.
Right.
You know, well, $900 some thousand dollars for a school with, it's our smallest school in the whole district. So we're making a huge commitment,
Yes,
which would really contradict what was just said.
Yeah, I mean, it's an investment, and what we've got to make sure is that we're getting the most out of that investment, and that we have the right people in place, delivering the right kinds of services that are needed for the profile of the young people that we have. We have to make some adjustments, and we will.
Ms. Murray?
Yes, and I do thank you for that report that you did provide to us as a board. One of the things that really I was concerned about is making sure that we didn't get locked into anything before our contract had to be renewed. We have to realign it, and adjustments have to be made, but the fact of it is that with an investment like this, knowing that the student body that we have, we want to continue to build because we know our enrollment needs to increase as well.
That's right.
Okay, to justify what we're doing here. But the fact is that we service the young people, the students that we originally started with. You know, things kind of shift on. I said we don't keep our eye on the ball, and that's one of the concerns, as well as the fact of connecting to the community, because that's been a very large void. We have, most of our teachers do not live in the community, so we need to have outreach, and we have to have people who understand where our students are coming from. But my most concern was making sure that we didn't get locked into anything, and I think that's one of the things that you had spoken about yourself and Mr. Zadona were looking at, so that we didn't get locked into anything prior to getting this corrected.
I'm glad you said that. It is a point well taken, and obviously, there's got to be a level of accountability, and when you lay out certain specific objectives and expectations and deliverables, and you expect that when you're making this kind of investment that you're going to get what you're paying for. I for years ran a private company, and when I contracted with districts, we were accountable. We had to be accountable, or else you get fired. That's what happens. So yes, and we have contractually what we need within our contracts, and if we're not satisfied with performance, we can take the kind of steps that we need to take.
Any other comments, questions? Ms.
Yeah.
Mosby?
That was one of my concerns, was although we're getting close to $1 million, as Mr. Barbers stated, we just have to make sure that that money is being allocated and put properly, properly with the children, since I think it's like 700,000 of it is in salary in a sense, and if you're paying people salary of that kind of money, I want to see how that is going to transform into services to the kids, because the kids are the ones that need the services. And that was one of my concerns with the piece of the pie, to make sure that they are definitely giving the kids the services that they need. And I just want to make sure that we stay very much on top of it, and to keep the, as Ms. Murray said, to keep the community involved, because a lot of the community still feel that they're being shut out. And as far as the capital budget, in a sense, I know that there's $300,000 that was, allocated for technology. I guess they're looking at the building itself as to what are we gonna be doing about the building itself? Because those kids over there, I've been over there a few times, and although it looks better than what it did before, it could be a lot better. And our goal is to make sure that we do service the children that are there and not to lose them in the middle of this, and to make sure that if we're getting this type of money, that is definitely being used for the purpose that it's supposed to be used for, and that is to help those children. And that's something that I think that we need to keep an eye on, because we tend to give them, free rein, and they run over there and they do whatever they want, and our children are not getting the services that they need. So that's one of my concerns, to make sure that we stay on top of that.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, next we'll move on to item 5, actions. First one is the consent calendar, which tonight is 6.2A, approval personnel, 6.2B, approval of budget transfers, and 6.2C, 1, 2, and 3, 3 school trips, Brian McMahon to Washington DC, Roten to Philadelphia, Washington DC, and Ponas to Ivoryton for Nature's Classroom. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar. Mr. Chiaramatti moves. Is there a second? Mr. Kasimis, any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of adopting the consent calendar, please indicate. And motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And next item is, I'm sorry.
That's one question.
Yeah.
So I just noticed that the assistant principal resigned. That was effective immediately. Okay.
Yes. Yes. He resigned in December, and I believe Friday was his last day.
Okay, next item is discussion of and possible action on agreement with Human Services Council. This is for the health centers in the schools. My understanding is this is pretty much the standard agreement that we've had for years. It was delayed in the law department getting to us, but it's here now, and this is for the continuation of the Appleton Center. Is there a motion to approve the contract? So moved by Mr. Kasimis, second. Mr. Barbas, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, please indicate. And the motion carries unanimously. The contract is approved. And that brings us to the main event, presentation of and action on 2014 to 2017 budget. Dr. Rivera and Mr. Rudel, please take it away.
What I'd like to do is walk through a little bit of information about the process that we followed, talk a little bit about upfront the sort of the planning framework that we had actually been working on over the past several months. And the reason why I want to share a little bit about the planning framework is because the plan and the planning framework also sets the stage for our budget. And to the extent that we can, our job was to align our budget and our resources with what we're trying to accomplish. Can everybody hear me okay? We talk a little bit about sort of the, let's see, how do I go back here? The planning phase, because I don't think I really had the opportunity in our last meeting to give you some of the detail about the planning and what went into the planning. I actually began the process as early as late September, meeting with some of the staff that reported directly to me. There are other staff that we then widened that circle, and we brought in principals, and we began identifying ideas, not just dealing with our own planning priorities and what those should be given where we are as a city, and as a school district, but also in thinking about how we might make budget adjustments. So we actually went through an internal process with a number of key staff, again, including principals, to look at a whole host of issues. We spent time on our mission, we spent time on the vision, we spent time on our goals, discussing what our goals would be, what those assessments would be. We then shifted into talking about priorities for the organization. Then we actually even had teams working together, trying to flush out some of the ideas that had surfaced. We met 9 different times for 2 to 3 hours at a clip. That's just as a total group. Then, and when I say a total group, there's probably anywhere from 12 to 15 people. Then there were sub-teams that actually met to generate work. For example, I was very interested in pursuing the teaching of a second language beginning as early as kindergarten, and wanting to know how can we better use technology perhaps to even support the teaching of a second language at an early grade level. So we looked at, so the team actually looked at what all of our different language offerings were. They looked at different possible opportunities outside, and we realized about a month and a half, 2 months later, that this was the kind of recommendation that could be very meaningful and something we needed to pursue, but we should pursue that and do it well, and do it for 2015, 2016. We looked at everything from the role of social workers and psychologists, the different duties and responsibilities that they have, and what would be the best resource. We looked at the role of guidance counselors at each of our schools, really trying to understand the services that they're providing today, and some of the needs we have in our schools. We looked at attendance, substitute costs, we examined vacancies. Even when we started to have a discussion about the planetarium, we realized this isn't a savings here. This is a reworking of what that space could be and what we could do with that space at Rotary. The whole library redesign had a major impact in terms of what we do. So there was a team, Ralph and Callie worked together to help shape that library redesign. There were meetings that were held in some of our schools with some of our librarians and other staff. We looked at the role of teacher aides. We have probably in our budget, I would guess more than $7 to $8 million in teacher aides. Teacher aides assigned to kindergartens, teacher aides assigned through priority funding to first grades, teacher aides assigned for class size overage. And we were trying to better understand the impact of teacher aides. Again, we reached a point where we don't have enough good data and information by which to make a judgment or a recommendation at this point. You know, as I think about, we have teachers for teacher aides for when we have class size overages. If you look at the research about class size, where it has an impact is in the very early grade levels, and where there's a cutoff of about 15 to 1 or less. So, you know, it raises questions about, would it be more efficient to have smaller class sizes? Lots of different questions. I don't want to go too far down the road, but really good, thoughtful discussions happened at a lot of these meetings that led to some of the ultimate recommendations that we made, and why I did not advance certain things now, but did put them on the table for 2015, 2016. We did a central office position-by-position review with the department heads, every single position. I don't want to see the job description. I want to know what they're doing. We had that kind of analysis that we went through for every single position centrally. We did, I did a line-by-line item review. Every single line item in our budget, examined. Pages, probably had folders on 10 different areas with detailed notes, wanting to understand what's in our budget. We did a detailed middle school review. We weren't able to get to all the middle schools, but we went to 2 middle schools. Some people had suggested that we look at our existing labor management agreements. Are there potentially any opportunities for either cost savings or other ways in which we might do work differently? We had a legal analysis completed by our attorney, Pullman, detailed legal analysis of the contracts in terms of what was manageable this year and what we believed we could do. So we had 9 meetings, detailed meetings with staff, many sub-meetings to gather input. We had 5 focus groups, which I'm going to talk about. Focus groups which many of you came to. I know the Finance Committee, Rosa and Mike, I saw regularly. We were at our various focus groups, and you were able to hear a good deal of the information that parents and staff and others were sharing at these various focus groups. There were labor management discussions. You know, my meetings with NASA, NFT, nothing in here is a surprise. There have been discussions along the way to keep our larger unions involved and engaged and getting input from them as well. I share this with you because all of this data and all of this information was extremely valuable. And so putting together our plan, our priorities, and our budget actually reflects the kind of input that I was able to get. So that was a process. I didn't want to belabor that, but I did want to take an extra 5 or 10 minutes to talk a little bit about that. In the focus groups, obviously, in every single focus group, people talked about our dedicated teachers and staff and the district's diversity as being 2 of the highest priorities and values of what they valued in the Norwalk Public Schools. People, parents, and others talked about the importance of extracurricular activities, after-school programs. You know, obviously, the marching band parents were there at every meeting. You know, we had other groups that came regularly, and I'll tell you, as a parent of 2 musicians who came out of Norwalk schools, you know, music and arts is a big, strong suit of ours, and it's very important. Special ed came up often as an area that we need to address, and there are certain recommendations in the CREC report that we actually are right now in the process of proceeding to address. How we might make better use of community resources with Norwalk was important, whether it's in pre-K, whether it's expanding mentors, whether it's expanding more tutoring services for young people. These are areas that we needed to connect with. World language, again, this is something that people talk about, the importance of second language learning. And if we talk about preparing our young people for 21st century, you know, we've got to begin now. There are places that are finding creative ways of teaching second language at a very early age, and that's when you do it, not 5 or 8 years later. And so that's going to be on our agenda for the upcoming year. They recommended, obviously, after I shared my plan, they recommended that we also pursue changing the culture to ensure that students achieve at high levels, that we prepare kids for post-secondary education. We have to pay attention to school safety and security. There was a good deal of discussion about equity in terms of resource distribution. And what is that? Well, you know, there are folks who came who talked about the fact that, and this particularly resonated when we got into discussion about marching band versus investments in sports and so on. And a feeling that as a system we were not, and you got to be careful here, equally distributing resources, which doesn't necessarily mean you get equity, but the idea of building greater equity and having a rationale for that in how we distribute resources for some of our after-school activities. Obviously, Common Core state standards require support, future training and development. Funding for extracurricular activities was a priority. People continue to invest in technology. Technology changes every 6 months, every year. We need to continue to make the investments as a system, and we are. We have been as a board. All of our buildings are going to be wireless within the next 60 days. You know, we've been purchasing our Chromebooks so that our students and staff have better capability. It's something we're just going to have to continually pay attention to. Changing and enhancing and changing the role of libraries. That's part of the plan. again, special ed, and obviously going after new sources of revenue, including corporate partnerships and grants. That was one of the criteria when you hired me as superintendent. You wanted someone who would also, as part of the job, go out and continue to seek funding, and I'm doing so. So that was focus group input, which all obviously led. We are going through a process where the board, I believe we had agreed that one of the next steps would be through the policy committee, and have further discussion about that, either at that committee level, would work to create consensus around our mission and what that mission is. The existing mission that we have is one that's been in existence for many, many years, and I believe that we needed to revisit what that mission is and what our vision is. And again, I thanked you once before, I'll thank you again. I think the participation from our meeting more than a month ago was extremely valuable with the input that you provided to this, and it actually, you'll see some of the changes here in the goals and in other areas. But for transforming Norwalk, I'm going to talk more specifically about each of these. Creating a culture of accountability, what I call change levers. And without trying to use any jargony terms, these are things that if we are going to really transform Norwalk Public Schools and get the kind of high performance that we expect from every single child in this school, we have to be going on all cylinders and all tracks. We have to look at how we change the culture that we operate in, high expectations and standards. I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute with what I'm talking about. Building the knowledge and skills and the capacity of our teachers and school leaders. Principals are key in our buildings. We've got to be really clear about the standards, the professional leadership standards that we have for our principals. We're not. We talk about, I'll get it into it in a little bit, but we've got to be really clear about that. Similarly for our teachers. A third key one, and the data has been in our face for years and years and years, but we've got to have a full frontal attack here that every single child in our system by the end of grade 3 is achieving at or above goal. I'm not talking about the proficiency standard that Connecticut has. I'm talking about at or above goal. When we as a system have 52 or 53% of our children who are not meeting standard, we got a ways to go. So we can get there. We can get there with a focus, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in terms of not just zeroing in on literacy, but how we also better engage parents and communities as part of this in the education of kids. We got to have systems and structures in place. I'll talk about what I mean when I say that. And we have to really change the mindset. Somehow, we've got to find a way to change the mindset of our young people. When you come into school, you know what the goal is? The goal is a industry certification, or to be able to go on to a college or university of your choice and graduate with an associate's degree or a 4-year degree and beyond. That's got to be the mindset. That's got to be the mindset. High school diploma is one step along the way. The whole notion of a pre-K through 16 system, we have to try to make real here. That's what's going to be incredibly valuable. Our primary goal is to close the achievement gap by 2020 and assure that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, or economic circumstances, are meeting high standards. So we're going to close the gap, but we're not going to sacrifice standards. That's what we have to do. And that's what we can do. Now, goals. Children ready to enter kindergarten. Students meet goal level at grade 3 reading. We are going to have as part of this plan, when it's finished, there will be very specific goals. When we were in our retreat, I shared with you some of the assessments that we were going to use. I mentioned to you that behind every single one of these focus areas and priorities, there's going to be some detailed action steps, who's accountable for what. We are also going to have very clear goals in each of these areas. We're going to be clear about the assessments. Then we're going to have a system where even every single school, in terms of their school growth plan, their plan that they're doing, is going to be aligned with these goals. And the kinds of strategies and activities that we're going to want to see, we're going to have to be driving these goals. So that's, when I talk about a system that's perfectly aligned, that's what I'm talking about here. We have to address the needs of all kids, including ELL students, and there's got to be goals and objectives there. Our special ed students, we need to see more and more and more of our students meeting their IEP objectives, meeting their goals in that area, and obviously more students graduating and truly prepared for college and careers. But behind this, there's a lot of detail which we have to pay attention to, which we do have, which is going to be part of this larger plan. Here are some of the focus areas. Build greater accountability against high expectations and standards. We will have, when this plan is done, a shared mission, vision, values. We will have goals. There will be very clear metrics. We will have performance expectations that will guide our work. And we will have professional standards aligned with the new evaluation system. When we have a standard where everybody is rated proficient or exemplary, and our performance data is telling us otherwise, we're accepting mediocrity. We can't. We have to be clear of what our professional standards are, how that's got to then be aligned with our performance appraisal system. We have to have a performance appraisal system that supports growth and development, but you also have to have one that, you know, if things aren't working, you got to be able to make decisions. But we've got to raise the bar for everybody, which is what I'm saying. We cannot accept mediocrity if we're going to get the kind of results that I think we can here in Norwalk. We ought to be reviewing our school. We ought to have what I call school quality reviews, which means every year there ought to be 1 to 2 schools that goes through a rigorous process. Just as NEAS, the New England accreditation, that Norwalk High and Bryant McMahon have to go through the New England accreditation, our own schools, our elementary schools, our middle schools should be going through a very, very rigorous quality review process. We ought to be publicly reporting on I should be accountable to you and publicly reporting on progress. And you know what? We should, when we have accomplishments, we should be recognizing those. We should be celebrating when things go well and they're right. That's what a good organization does. And if you're not, and your data is telling you that things aren't working, then we better have a plan to correct it. So that's got to be part of it. We've got to have school dashboards that are easier. You know, I don't want to digress, but you know, I've become a weatherman in the last few days. I look at these weather charts that compare precipitation, snowfall, wind chill, all these things. You got to be able to synthesize all that and make a decision. We got to know what are our key indicators. What really makes a difference in the quality of a school and for the performance of a child? What are those key indicators? We've got to track those, and we've got to make adjustments as we follow. Quality control is something that's come up a lot as we talk about special ed and what comes out of our PPT meetings. We want to make sure that if we're going to roll out a new K-5 literacy program in our 6-12 literacy and math, there's got to be quality associated and fidelity with how we implement these programs and the kind of training that we do. So these are things that we have to pay attention to as part of being and behind every one of these, there's specifics, objectives that we would be ready to share with you. Common Core state standards. Okay, so what are we going to do? What's the plan? We've got to have a very detailed training plan of how we're going to support. What's the integration of Common Core and the new K-5 literacy program? We ought to be really clear. We ought to be saying, here's what we're gonna be doing in the spring, here's what we're gonna be doing in the summer, here's what we're gonna be doing in the fall, and guess what? These are non-negotiable. These are the kinds of skills that every single teacher and administrator must have. They're non-negotiable. And that's what we have to organize for as we go forward. Personalized learning is another huge area. We've got to know our students. We've got to know who they are, the assets and the strengths that every single kid brings to us. We've got to be able to tap into that and find a way to turn on the excitement and the desire of every kid to want to learn and to love learning. And personalized learning is directly aligned with that. And that's what we're going to be actually, I've got another sub-team that's working to address that. The whole, that the state passed a law, we've got these student success plans, was in part intended to get at that. You know, in a conversation I had at the state, we want to try to convert that. We want to create personalized learning plans for our kids. It gets them engaged in different ways. English language learners, what are the skills that others have? Supporting the instruction of English language learners is not just the responsibility of an ESL teacher. Everybody within that school has a responsibility to support learning for English language learners. So people have to have the knowledge and skills to be able to do that. Special education, appreciation, and understanding of different cultures needs to be packaged as part of our professional development and training for all staff. I talked about library redesign. I shared a little bit about the Briggs commitment to Briggs and the turnaround that has to happen there. We've got schools that are up for reaccreditation. That we need to pay attention to that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with curriculum development. Issue was raised. You know, the middle to high school transition and alignment. How we can better make adjustments for students to make that transition much easier in different areas. Expanded use of technology, and looking at potentially new programs within the city that we could be designing and offer as choice to our families. I've got folks ready to go, chomping at the bit, wanting to start talking about how we can bring an international baccalaureate program to our high schools. The early college high school, another potential option where there's a partnership with NCC that would be supported by the state. These are things that we ought to be pursuing when the opportunity is in front of us. Special ed, created a separate category here. Obviously, I talked a lot about that. There's actually some really good work. We spent all day Friday with outside assistants examining the report that was done, looking at very specific actions that we're going to take with names and dates and what we're going to do to advance our work in the area of special ed. Also, shifting to one of the latter points, improving and building the systems and structures necessary to support our new learning environment. We've got to have state-of-the-art HR office. It all, you know, the kinds of teachers that we recruit, where we recruit, how we recruit, when we begin to recruit, how we select staff, the kinds of in orientation and induction that they go through. All of that is critically important. The fine-tuning and the development of the performance appraisal systems for administrators and for teachers needs attention. And just greater operational excellence. We need better systems in place. You know, files this high, you go to look for things and you can't find them, and we ought to have a better data management systems to support our HR efforts. Obviously, I put financial and resource management. I do want, and I've been thinking about this quite a bit, it may be in our best interest as we look at involving sites more in budget decisions rather than sort of a central view of budgets. And may well be best to look at piloting it in schools with strong governance team, where there are strong governance teams in operation. And the possibility of us to expand opportunities for more governance teams in our system could be also linked to that, creating incentives around that. looking at curriculum instruction, obviously, I've talked a little about quality control, I've talked about data systems, moving towards a new student information system. We're going to Power School, something that's being used around the state, a much more sort of comprehensive system for managing student information. I've talked about school master schedules. Yes, at the elementary level, some schools operate on a 4-day schedule, some operate on a 5-day schedule, some operate on a 6-day schedule, and there could be some real inefficiencies where you actually have an itinerant teacher who has to come to provide a service, and this child is in another class and teachers sit there. You can't have those kinds of inefficiencies in our system. So there are some opportunities to be gained there, and we actually have a pretty good resource looking at Norwalk High School right now, actually. And we're expecting a report later this month from that individual. But there's some efficiency. We're thinking about the future here in terms of 2015, 2016. Facility utilization plan, all of our schools. There are companies, organizations that look very carefully at birth rate data, census data, job growth data. They look at projections, they look at trends. They're able to compile all of this data and information and then make decisions about what it's going to look like. If you do nothing, here's where you're going to be at Marvin Elementary. Let's assume we got all these housing developments. Let's assume all these families move in with, they got 3 bedrooms, all with children. We could find ourselves potentially in a situation, if we do the analysis correctly, that we know we're going to have a problem 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. It's also good at the same time when we do that to have discussions about what are some possibly more creative opportunities here. Do we want to consider potentially some grade configuration changes? Some schools that may operate as a K-8. There may be other opportunities that we could see, or a school that's underrepresented, that's under-enrolled, where there may be an opportunity for a different magnet type emphasis. That creates the opportunity for those discussions to be had once we complete the facility utilization plan. So we got to build partnerships, we got to increase access to pre-K for early learning. That means working closely with Norwalk Acts. We want to expand access to after school and summer learning. Having discussions right now about how we can use some of our Title I funds a little differently to create more opportunities after school for our students. We've got a number of children who live in a district where there is no real home school. It's the District 99. Many buses bring children home. I'd love to be able to create quality after-school programs and Saturday programs for students, as well as in some of the schools that we have that have access to Title I funds. Now, we want to see more mentors. We actually, again, a lot of this is in part depending on our partners, and we want to ensure that students' health needs are met. Here's the thing, there's a lot here. And we're going through a process right now to look at what's achievable. We don't want to go down a road and do something that is half-baked. We really want quality with what we do. So there's another set of discussions that have to be had before I can come back to you with a more specific plan in terms of how we proceed. But I'm not talking about an overlay of more stuff on folks who are already overlooked. I'm talking about changing how we do business. I'm talking about setting the stage to do things differently. This is not an overlay. It's not saddling people with, but how we operate, how we begin to do things differently, is what a lot of this is intended to do. So it's the framework. The detailed plan itself is probably 30 to 45 days away. There's more work, and it'll come back through the policy committee as we work closely with the policy committee. Teeing up the budget, as we shift now from plan to budget, looking at enrollment trends, we obviously have, our enrollment has increased, about 100, close to 100 students in the last year. projections for next year, Rich, just out of curiosity? Potentially 100 more. We're on the upswing. We've got more children entering our system, and we've got to pay attention to that. But that's where we are now, 100 more students. It's a very interesting fact, if we look at the number of children coming into our system, is a significantly greater percentage are eligible for free or reduced lunch. And there are questions asked that you posed to me about the impact of that. And obviously, we talked a little bit about potential increase in Title I, but typically this can also be an impact in terms of programmatic needs that we need to pay attention to with some of our young people. But it's been fairly dramatic in a fairly short period of time in terms of the makeup. And this is what drives me crazy when I continue to try to understand the state formula for distributing funds to revenue, state education fund. Good luck. Because Norwalk may well be in a high property wealth area, obviously. Westport, I don't need to name them. But the needs of our families and our children are increasingly, are rapidly increasing, and most of the public, at least I think outside of Norwalk, are not necessarily familiar or understand that. And we are actually classified, and this is another bit of data that I think I have. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. With the ECS funding and enrollment, the state classifies us in a category called age. They call it the DIRG. I'm not even sure what it stands for. But these are districts with sort of similar distributions of poverty levels or pre-reduced lunch levels and other needs. And you can see here, this is where categorized on one level, 7% of our aid is of our state aid that we get. 7% of our aid is state aid. Whereas in other districts, of similar size, Danbury, 23%, roughly the same size. We actually, this number was actually, it was 51%, which we did an audit for that. But we're pretty comparable to Danbury. We get 10.9 million or 11 million. They're at $27 million in terms of state aid, ECS funding that they get. Obviously, Stanford is in a similar situation with only 4%. But that's not the whole story that our legislators, many of them are aware of this, but that's not the whole story. When I started looking at revenue trends for transportation, while our transportation costs are going up, state reimbursements are going down. When I look at special ed, and our costs for special ed are going up, the excess cost aid that we get from the state, the percentage is going down. So we're getting hit on multiple levels. And, we've got to pay attention to this now. But we've got to have a very, very clearly articulated and strong legislative agenda and a strategy, if you will, and we're going to need to count on our area legislators to help to try to carry that. But we've got to figure out a way to get this data out there. Tell us. I know there have been yeoman's efforts. Many people have worked on this in the past, and it's been on the table before. I've talked with people who've invested a lot of time. I know that folks have actually gone to Hartford and lobbied, and there's been a lot of efforts in the past. I guess my point is we need to keep the pedal to the floor and not let this drop, because this is important. So, Rich, you want to go through the revenue assumptions and then the budget?
For 14-15 budget, we made a variety of assumptions. The recommended budget is for a 3.6% increase. Compared to last year, we asked for a 3.4% increase, so it's relatively close to what we asked for last year. expense assumptions, the salaries are all in accordance with collective bargaining agreement for the various unions. Health insurance are based on projections from Lindbergh and Ripple and reflect about a 4% increase. This coming year, we're gonna be hit with a $5.25 per month per member fee, due to the Affordable Care Act, which will increase our budget to $220,000. The per pupil allocations to the schools remain flat at $85 for the high schools, $74 for the middle schools, and $71 for elementary schools.
Can you just quickly say what that is, because some people may think, well, geez, we're only spending $85 for at the high school kid. What does that actually represent?
It's a pot of money that the principals get to distribute amongst their school as they see fit. It's based on enrollment. If the principal decides they want to buy library books or textbooks or more supplies or memberships for their staff, they allocate it as they see fit. So it's not just the only funding for textbooks that
Right.
the district has.
Thank you.
Transportation increases are based on contractual obligations. 4.5% increase for first student. In addition to that, we have additional bands needed for an increase in special education students and an increase of another bus due to the Avalon housing. The key expense drivers are salary and benefits. Salary and benefits make up 84% of the operating budget. Special education tuition and consulting services make up about 6%. Transportation 4%. Utilities like fuel oil, electricity, natural gas 2%. Maintaining our facilities 1%. High school athletics 1%. And per pupil allocations are about 1%. So compared to last year, we're asking for $168.1 million, which is a 3.6% increase. These are the various line items that make up the budget. The biggest obviously being salaries and benefits, which is 84% of our budget. Breakdown of where the money goes. There's $3.1 million increase for the NFP for the teacher union. Other bargaining increases are $1.5 million. Benefits of $1.4 million. Dr. Rivera had mentioned in the priority planning, we have $870,000 for redesign funds that address things like the prep report and HR. We have transportation of $600,000, special ed, tuition and consulting services increases of $300,000, technology of $200,000. There's also reductions. We have excess Medicaid funds that we mentioned earlier of $350,000. We shifted some items into grants, primarily the Alliance Fund, $1.27 million, and we took over $1 million in reductions to the current budget. That gets to a $5.84 million increase over the current year.
Some of the highlights, obviously, we've been able to maintain low class size, and that's how we did prepare the organization for next year in terms of looking at the number of teachers that we would need. Obviously, that would reflect an increase of about $400,000. Maintaining sports and athletics, and there's something that I did not mention. This goes back to that equity question. We really should, as part of our preparation for 2015, 2016, we need to pursue that. We need to look at potential options of whether you define it as pay for play or how you mix private with public funds. This needs to be part of our agenda. We have to address this equity issue, and it's something that I don't know if I remember having that on the priority list, but we will be addressing it. In the meantime, in this particular budget, we have still continued to allocate $1.1 million. We did increase opportunities for more of our young people in intramural sports to the tune of about $100,000.
And just clarification too, and I think we talked about this at one of the earlier meetings, we restored the middle school intramural sports last year, but the plan this year is to additionally restore a bunch of the other extracurricular activities, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, special education, we've talked a little bit about, and there will be both a reorganization and whether or not it's that exact amount. We'll have a better sense of that in the coming weeks, but that was our preliminary estimate. And as well as increasing funds for human resource department redesign, reorganization, and improvement, we budgeted $285,000. We established a one-time fund to create a facility utilization plan. Again, this is one of those sources where we will most likely go out to bid for this, and we'll look at who's done this kind of work, who's done it well, who meets our specs that we set forward. Whether it's 80,000 or 90,000, we're not sure, but we felt that that would be a safe number, sort of right in the mid-range of the estimates that I was given. I was given estimates of $75,000 to $150,000, so this is good. We spent a good deal of time looking at grant and foundation funds, and in this particular case, to refocus some of that funding so that we could put in place at every single one of our K-5 schools a full-time curriculum and instruction site director who would have primary responsibilities to deliver the Common Core program, our K-3 literacy, and to provide supervision and evaluation. I can't disclose a potential foundation, and probably can't do that until late February, but I'm confident that we have a commitment for 5 additional positions, combined with our 6 covers 11. Whether or not, I'm sure, hopefully we should be able to perhaps raise other funding so we can actually achieve this and do it.
And just for clarification, these positions are not new. This is a reorientation of the assistant principal position. Correct.
The 6 assistant principal positions are being eliminated. And there's a new position, curriculum and instruction site director, and we will work out some of the more specific details around the roles and responsibilities, but these are the 3 primary areas. That was part of our agreement.
Okay.
And we will come together to finalize the process for that selection and hiring of these individuals. Obviously, grant funds are targeted to support more professional development for board-approved priorities, advancing board priorities for technology, communication, library design, astronomy, and the Science Center. In part, by your approval of, ultimately, there's still some work that needs to be done, the strategic plan and the budget, this becomes this is what you're telling, this is what we want to support, this is what we're endorsing, this is what we want to see happen in the system. And that enables me then, as your CEO, to work with all of our staff and to deliver and thrive and try to achieve and work to achieve the priorities that we have set as a school system. The budget reductions and allocations are about 6 positions, 3 of which are vacant. As we went through them, there's some reorganization that was done. We've reallocated Alliance and other grant funding sources to support ELL services, the curriculum and instruction site directors, and grants department changes. We generated savings in facility accounts through the use of more in-house work and vendor changes. And actually there was a level of, I guess while we were working on these initiatives, Rich and other staff were looking at other areas where there could be cost savings, and they were factored into, but these are the budget, but these essentially are the reductions and reallocations of some of the funding. And I did provide for you in your packet that you should have received before Christmas, sort of detailed explanation of each one of those areas. In summary, the budget represents an operating increase of 3.6% over FY 13-14. In order to move forward, we are taking a multi-year approach. We already, in this budget, through the identification of several key areas, we're beginning to target those potential adjustments, changes that we want to pursue in the future. And I think, I don't know, are they in the next page? Yeah.
The budget will address the correct report. It'll move us forward with implementation of Common Core. It'll strengthen early literacy. It addresses class size concerns, and I think will strengthen central services and central service support of the work that needs to unfold in schools. Good.
So we took a multi-year approach, as Dr. Rivera mentioned. So what is a multi-year model? It's a combination of budgeting, strategy, and forecasting over multiple periods. It institutionalizes the idea of long-range thinking, combined budgeting with strategic ideas and decisions. It increases the understanding of key expense drivers throughout our budget. And for a larger organization, it plays an integral role in financial planning. So the assumptions in the multi-year model are salaries for the NFT reopener remain at the existing scale. There is a reopener next year, or this year. Placeholder for general wage increases for all unsettled contracts. It meets collective bargaining requirements. Health insurance increases at an annual premium rate of 5% per year as more employees migrate to HSA plans. All level of grant funding remains the same. Kept per pupil allocations the same as well. And we estimated a student enrollment increase of approximately 1% starting in 2014 from a demographer. We looked at out-of-district tuition for special ed students increasing at 4%, with out-of-district students increasing at 3%. So there's a weighted average applied to all the institutions that we have within special ed. It maintains existing levels of supplies and services with only slight add-backs. It maintains a local commitment to the new curriculum and instructional site directors. There are no additional positions after 14-15, with the exception of reserve teachers for higher projected enrollment to keep class sizes down. So as we mentioned earlier, for next year, the increase is 3.6%. So based on these assumptions, the year after 4.7%, or 176 million, and the year after that, 3.5%. So some of the budget pressures that we face long-term are the NFT salary schedule, degree level changes, health insurance, special education, out-of-district tuition and consultant services, transportation, Medicaid reimbursement. We were required to get parental consents for Medicaid reimbursement. The fewer parental consents we get, the less Medicaid reimbursement dollars we get. The loss of carryover funds and grants, and just overall uncertainty regarding grants in general. Target areas that we mentioned earlier include extracurricular, sports, and after-school programs, special education to provide in-house services as opposed to sending all students out of district, scheduling efficiencies, labor management agreement and analysis, world languages, teacher aids, transportation, revenue, looking at all use of grant funds and how we can reallocate it towards district goals and priorities, seeking additional foundation and grant funds. All these are items that could change the projection going in outer years. The more grant funds that we get, the lower the burden will be on the local fund. As we do more analysis on things like after-school sports and activities, that could bring down the burden on the local fund as well as utilization and effectiveness of teacher aids.
That is our presentation.
Are there questions or comments from members of the board? Mr. Kasimis.
Question. I think throughout the budget that we had looked at, you had mentioned developing systems. I think I saw it more than once. Are these systems going to be independent of each other? Are they going to talk to each other? Like the HR system, and I think there was another one.
Yeah, I think we absolutely must have systems that talk to each other. A good example is, finance and HR. When the ability of making sure that your data is accurate and that if I ask Rich, what's the cost of teacher aides at school X and what are we getting? His data is accurate because it's connected to our HR data. One thing that I'm still trying to understand, and we had a little bit of discussion about this, is the city uses a system called Munis, and I've been told that we are not fully utilizing the capability of Munis, so we're going to look at that. I think we'll look at other potential systems, but yes, there has to be an alignment and a connection there. Even as we, naively ask, as we shift from Genesis to Power School, I said, is that gonna impact the parent portal? And I wanna make sure our parents can still have access. No, it's not. They're still gonna be able to get connected and get the information about the students, so all of those things are critically important. Yep.
Other questions? Ms. Keys?
Thank you. I really love the idea about the second language learners.
Yes.
And I know a lot of our other districts, other schools in close area here have that and offer that. I know that you mentioned starting that in kindergarten, 2015, 2016 school year. Have we thought about maybe even starting that even earlier, some of our preschool programs, just before the cusp, before they get into kindergarten? Just a thought.
No, well,
Yeah.
that's really when it should start. I mean,
Yeah.
the earlier the better.
We're really learning.
As children develop and grow and their vocal cords harden, there's actually a real science about second language learning that starts at a very early age. And so, there's different sounds that they hear, there are things that parents can do or preschool educators can do that are prepare children for second language learning. I think that's gotta be part of it. One of the, the area of pre-K is one where, obviously, I've said this publicly, I'd love to see every 2, 3, and 4-year-old, be able to have access to quality early learning. And that's but it's gotta be something that's done in partnership with the community and with the Norwalk Acts. There are states that have passed legislation, such as Ohio, where children at 4 years of age carry with them full per pupil funding, and in DC. So to the extent that we can serve more children at a younger age here and get the funding that we need to do that, and work with kids, but second language learning really ought and could and should be part of that.
Good. And also another question as far as the partnership with NCC. Where are we at with that? I mean, I know that's been discussed at length, but, and I think we're also looking at 2015, 2016 school year to possibly
Yes.
implement that.
We did have both David Levinson and I, and the Commissioner of Education, his deputy, Garth, I can't remember his last name, from Superintendent from New Haven, and the president of Gateway Community College in New Haven. They want to pilot an early college high school program in Norwalk and New Haven. And so, I did have a meeting with Dr. Levinson before the holiday, and we're going to be assigning 1 or 2 people to begin the planning. We're going to actually have a planning meeting. But 2014, 2015 is going to be a design year, and it's our hope to be able to start off with a few number of students in 2015, 2016. So it's going to be a design year. I'll probably have more information on that, I would probably say within the next 60 days or so.
Are we going to pilot that at one of our high schools, whether it's Norwalk High?
Well, there's different ways you can go. You can actually pilot it as a satellite as one of your high schools, or you can actually create a standalone early college high school. So we haven't, Dr. Levinson's open to both. There are models that do both. We haven't quite crystallized what we'd like for Norwalk.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Jack?
I saw something up there on the healthcare going up, with an additional 5, what was it?
4% for next year.
What was that?
Now 5%.
Everything we're seeing in the news and everything being still fluid right now, what we're watching on the nation, on the healthcare. They say that next year it's gonna hit businesses, and a lot of policies might be dropped. Is that gonna affect cities like us,
A
or?
big benefit for us was we migrated a lot of employees from PTOs to high deductible health savings account. That's one of the main reasons why we saw a lower increase than we had in prior years. In outer years, the increase in health insurance could be affected due to the Affordable Care Act and the Cadillac tax that takes place in 2018. But that's for about 3 or 4 years now. And it really depends on the trend rate of the high deductible healthcare plans, which do trend significantly lower than PPOs.
Is it they'll cost less because you have to build up,
You have to-
spend a lot of money out of your pocket for it.
Right.
Is that something that's gonna be forced on cities, like it is with other businesses?
Most areas, most cities, most municipalities and universities and businesses are gonna probably go day to day.
Other questions, comments? While you're up there, we do, we do have another budget that we need to approve tonight, which is the capital budget. I know we don't have a separate PowerPoint discussion of that, but all the board members have had this for some time. Could you, maybe Rich can just give us a quick summary of the capital budget plan as well?
Capital budget for 14-15 is approximately $5.8 million. We're asking for $2.3 million to continue to support the Common Core, over $1 million for textbooks and for technology. There's enhancements to school security of $1.7 million. We have $600,000 pending the special appropriation of $500,000 this year to enhance school security. We're asking for an additional 1.7. That is to support the district safety committee's recommendations that the Norwalk Police Department, in conjunction with the school district, had for every one of our schools. Just shy of $1 million for district technology. This is for items, things like Chromebooks and other technology. Road construction of $380,000, and district paving and concrete for our schools for $365,000.
And the school security improvements are based on the police
They're all
department
based on the
surveys?
police department surveys that we got for every one of the schools within the district. All the recommendations were taken for every single school district.
Okay. All right, any questions on the capital budget request or comments? All right. Well, I want to, then let me compliment both of you for the job you've done here. I mean, having served for 6 years on the Board of Estimate, where I saw budget proposals come in from the Board of Ed that bordered on incoherent and people who couldn't answer basic questions about money. I think last year we saw a dramatic improvement in our basic budget documentation. Rich has done a great job on that. And this year, the real enhancement of this process into a long-term planning process. So we're clearly moving away from the past practice of the budget being, take last year's numbers, add 4%, here's our budget, into a really well thought out, long-term strategic plan that is being worked into the budgets. I mean, a well-run budget is a planning document. And that's what you guys have created here. And I like the fact that in addition to, you know, the big detailed budget book, this summary material, which first came out last year with Rich and Tony, has continued this year and really gives us a nice high-level ability to look at the overall budget, then the budget pressures that are generating it. You can pull out a page that says, here's where we're proposing new positions. You can pull out another page, here's where the improvements are that we're making, as opposed to here's the baseline stuff that we have to do to meet contractual obligations. And not only is this a good planning tool for us, it also makes it a lot easier for the Common Council and the Board of Estimate to analyze our budget and make their determinations how much they can afford to give us, because they have some confidence that they know what we're going to do with the money if we get it. And you know, if you look at page 9 of the big spreadsheet, it really lays out the improvements in a quick, simple format that you talked about in some detail. For all of the intramurals and the clubs, and then the big ticket items are the facility utilization, the redesign of the HR department. And we've talked about this at length, that HR needs to be a strategic function in a organization like this to bring in the best talent that we can and to manage the process of evaluating the talent that we have. The redesign of some of the special ed, which is the pupil services redesign. the better student information system. These are all real enhancements and not a massive amount of money. I mean, in the scale of a budget of this size, we've got about $1 million worth of improvements in here. But I think what this plan says is that it's not the sheer number of the dollars, it's how we're spending them. And I commend you for the very deep thought that you've done here. You've, in this master planning process, which is not complete, you've taken a lot of things we were already working on, you've come up with new ideas and integrated them into it. And I think, you know, going forward, there are three elements of what we have to do here. This strategic plan has three elements: long-term budgets, policy amendments, so our policy committee is going to be busy, personnel enhancements, is with special needs, and I was saying to Artie before that I think all of our committees are going to be very busy this year. You've got a lot of work for us to do. The finance committee is going to have to look at the budgetary implications. Jack, your committee is going to have a whole lot of work to do on this utilization study. You're going to be working on school security enhancements. Curriculum is going to be busy with working on literacy improvements. But I really get the sense now that we're getting some real goals that we can target and aim at. Always struck me as the problem with the U.S. space program nowadays is we're not going anywhere. We just keep going around in circles. When in the 1960s, we knew we needed to get to the moon. When you had a specific goal, it was you could marshal resources and get you there. And that's what this plan strikes me as doing. It sets definable goals that we can aim towards and marshal resources to get there. So I'm very pleased with the work that you've done. I'm pleased that even with the pressures that we were under, even with having the teachers' pay raise going in, that we still managed to come in with a budget increase almost exactly the same as last year's. I think, this is fiscally responsible. It's not like the old days where we used to ask for 8% increases. It's a fiscally responsible request that still manages to move us forward. And also, I like the fact that you're realistic about what we can do. If you try to jam everything into 1 year, you're going to do it halfway and you're going to fail. I think it's a good part of this that with a long-term budget, you can say, well, as you pointed out in several situations, this is a great idea, but we can't do it this year. Let's make that a 15-16 objective or a 16-17 objective. So I think if you phase these things in, you make it a lot more likely that we're going to do it right. So my compliments on what obviously was a lot of work.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, if none, I think we should probably take two separate votes on these things. So, Chair would entertain a motion to approve the operating budget as proposed by the superintendent. Mr. Kasimis moves. Is there a second? Mr. Chiramonte seconds. Is there further discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the budget, please indicate. Unanimous approval. Chair would now entertain a motion to approve the superintendent's recommended capital budget request as submitted. Is there a motion? Ms. Murray moves. Is there a second? Ms. Keys seconds. Is there other discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please indicate. Motion carries unanimously. Well done. All right. Now, the chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation involving, pardon me? No, not tonight. Shit. Oh, that kind of thing we can do, sure. Personal point of privilege for Mr. Kasimis.
Mr. Colarossi and his wife Jen had a baby boy today at 7 pounds. He said he was 6'2", but I don't, Steve. So just wanted to relay that.
Great news. Thank you.
Mom and baby are doing well.
That's great. Thank you. All right, life continues after the Board of Ed. All right. So, Chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation. Mr. Kasimis moves. Is there a second? Ms. Keys seconds. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. 5-minute recess, and we'll talk lawsuits. Great.
See it all laid out. You're right. What impressed me the most was, you know, you get some bills out of these,
I heard the fireworks, and I didn't even see the bulk of that. Down,